listen, I got to bring up something else. I should mention we are eventually going to watch King of the Ring 1998. Eric is
what we were here for.
We've seen clips before, but Eric has never actually watched the full match for the Hell in a Cell, and we're going to do that. So if you haven't already, I want you to go to your Peacock, pull your Peacock out, get that rascal going, type in King of the Ring, and you want to go to season 6 of King of the Ring. That's 1998, of course.
Oh, am I doing that too? Am I doing that?
No. You got a link. And it's in your email from yesterday. So you worry about finding a link. It was emailed to you yesterday.
I hate when this happens because I'm so bad at this shit.
Dave Silva will copy paste it here in the private chat. But here's what I wanted to bring up to you. Before we talk about King of the Ring, season 6, episode 1 on Peacock, and before you go to 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds, I wanted to ask you about Vince Russo. And I know you've talked to death about Vince Russo for the last 4 weeks, but I did something that, well, some of our hardcore listeners here on 83 Weeks, they weren't too happy with me about. I at least had a conversation with Vince. Now, I haven't had the negative experiences with Vince that you have. So growing up in Alabama, I just treat people how they treat me. And he's always been great to me, and I've reciprocated in kind. And I bring this up because we talked about episode 3 of Who Killed WCW. And through that process, one of the things that he said was that, hey, man, I'm not hiding anything. I'm not running from any confrontation. You can hook me up, Conrad, to a lie detector and ask me anything you want. And, of course, my wheels start going, and I'm like, yes, I accept. I'll do that. What do you think of the idea of Vince offering me to hook him up to a lie detector test?
Here's the problem with guys like Vince Russo that believe his own lies. I absolutely believe that Russo believes his own bullshit. I've said that for years. That's one of the things that makes him so dangerous. And one of the reasons I don't trust him is because he is charming as fuck and he can convince you of whatever he wants to convince you of because he can convince himself of that. There's nothing Vince Russo can say in any way. You could hook him up to the fucking space station. I don't care. There's nothing that anybody can say that will convince me that Vince Russo is anything other than what he is. And we talked a little bit about this last night. My issue with, I've got a lot of issues, but they're relatively minor with regard to Russo. But if I don't trust someone, I can't work with them. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to be seen in the same room with him. I don't want to share a stage with him. I don't want to lend any degree of credibility or even conversation. I may not have any credibility left to give. That's okay. I can give a fuck. But I don't want to help draw attention to someone that I know is not trustworthy. And he's not. I talked about this last night a little bit. For me, it comes down to Bash at the Beach.
Hang on.
I'm sitting in a fucking trailer with Hulk Hogan, Vince Russo, me, and a phone with Brad Siegel on the other end. And Vince and I had been going back and forth all week long. My father had just passed away a few days earlier. I was in Minneapolis. I wasn't able to be in Atlanta. I was conducting my business over the phone with Hulk, with Russo, with Brad Siegel. Hulk and I knew what we wanted to do. Russo had been working all week with his own plan of what he wanted to do. We got to Bash at the Beach. It came to a head. I'm going to speed this up because we've already covered it. It came to a head. It forced Vince Russo, myself, and Hulk to get on the phone with Brad Siegel, and Brad Siegel got to make the vote. He got to break the tie. Russo wanted to do one thing. I wanted to do another thing. Brad Siegel was the tiebreaker. So we called Brad to break the tie. Brad broke the tie. And we went about meaning Hulk and I, and the rest of the team, went about executing our plan, or at least our portion of that plan. And once we left the building, which was a part of the plan that was going to set up Hulk Hogan's return in October at Halloween Havoc to challenge for the world title. Once we left the building, Vince Russo automatically went back to his original plan, despite the fact that Brad Siegel, Eric Bischoff, and Hulk Hogan agreed on that phone call to move forward with the Bischoff-Hogan plan. Now, I'm going to leave a crack in the door open. And I suggest that perhaps, especially after seeing Brad kind of slime around on camera for the last couple of weeks, and I don't have anything against Brad, but he was a little slippery during his interviews. A little is being kind. I'll leave a little bit of possibility open that after Hulk and I left that call, the conference call, either Brad circled back to Vince or Vince circled back to Brad, and somehow one of the other convinced the other that once Eric and Hogan leave, we're going to go ahead with our plan. It's the only thing I can think of. It's one of two things. There's no gray area. There's no reason to confuse it with a bunch of extraneous bullshit that doesn't fucking matter. You were in that room with Hogan, with me, with Brad. We agreed on one thing. You motherfucker did another. That's great. Go into business for yourself. Just don't ever expect to do business with me again. You can fight with me. You can argue. You can throw fucking furniture at me. I could care less. And when it's over, we'll shake hands and we'll go about our business. And we may even go have a beer after. But if you do something is, in my opinion, is dishonest and deceitful, whether Brad circled back to Vince or Vince circled back to Brad, if you participate in that and you're not honest and direct with me, fuck you. We're done. And your name goes on a list it'll never come off of. And Vince Russo's name is at the top of that list. So, yeah, you can hook him up to a lie detector. You can put a fucking gun in his mouth. I could care less what you do with him. Doesn't matter to me because it's not going to change anything.
So now that we know how you feel about that, I do have a natural follow-up to that. If you felt so strongly, why and how were you able to work with him in TNA? Because it's not like the story ended in 2000. You guys worked together 10 years later. How?
I gave him another chance. I made the mistake. I knew better, but I wanted to be a team player. I wanted, Hulk was interested in doing the deal. He wasn't going to go unless I went with him. I wasn't really interested in going to TNA because I just wasn't. I didn't need the money at the time. I was making more money than I ever had in my life outside of wrestling. I didn't need to go back to wrestling, but it was the opportunity was interesting. Hulk wanted to go. Hulk and I were pretty close. We had a lot of other business opportunities together that would have benefited from the exposure. And I convinced myself to, number one, forgive and forget. Well, forgive, not forget. And number two, I really wanted to try to be a team player. And I set myself up contractually where it didn't matter what Vince Russo did. The only thing I was interested in was the Hulk Hogan storyline and Hulk Hogan's participation in TNA. What he did outside of that, just I could care less. It wasn't my interest. It wasn't my job. I didn't want it to be my job. So it was me convincing myself to forgive, number one, combined with the fact that I wanted to be a team player, and it was a decent opportunity that could have provided momentum for some of the other things that we were doing. Plus, it was an opportunity. I brought Jason Hervey into the deal. Jason Hervey wasn't originally part of the deal. The original deal that was on the table was, it was because Hulk forced it, not because I wanted it, but I was there to oversee the Hulk Hogan participation in creative. Like I said, nothing else mattered to me, but I leveraged that because Jason Hervey and I were working so closely on other things outside of wrestling. And I'm the kind of person, if you're my business partner and we have a deal where, we're going to both work for this company and it's 50-50 and we're going to shake hands. I at that point, anything that I do, my business partner is going to be involved in, regardless of whether Jason was able to contribute or not. And the fact is, Jason contributed a lot. He brought a lot to the table behind the scenes from a production perspective. And I was able to leverage Jason Hervey into the deal. So overall, it felt like the right thing to do for me. I don't regret it because I do have some fond memories of TNA, particularly having the opportunity to work with my son, having the opportunity to work with some of the talent there that I never worked with, like AJ Styles and Frankie Kazarian and Chris Daniels and a lot of people that I still consider friends that I was able to work with in TNA. So I don't regret it, but yeah, that was the last time I'll make any concession for Vince Russo.
Go out of your way, if you haven't already, to check us out at adfreeshows.com. We went live last week and let all of our supporters ask Vince Russo questions. We did it a few days prior with Violent J, and we do it every month with Lex Luger, on a weekly basis with Kevin Sullivan, every month with David Crockett, every Saturday with Blue Meanie, and of course every Monday with either Nick Patrick or Mike Chioda. We are your home for all things bonus content and live interactive Q&As. You're on camera, they're on camera. We're watching old wrestling together. And you can find over 100,000 hours of bonus content, including every single StarCast stage show and panel discussion we've ever done at adfreeshows.com.